Well, it's June 17th, 2026, and my devotion today is in Proverbs 17 and verse number 14. And it says, "The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. Therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with." The beginning of strife, let me just define that real quickly. It's contention, quarrel, discord, disagreement among persons or things. It's not good, of course. It leads to contention, which is a contest to be right or the victor. And many times contention is because of pride. As a matter of fact, Proverbs 13:10 says, "Only by pride cometh contention." And so we know that it's because of pride that people become contentious. And strife here in Proverbs 17:14 is something that needs to be stopped. We can't let it continue. It needs to be stopped before it progresses as something that causes irreversible harm. In this proverb, it is compared to a small leak that must be plugged before it causes an uncontrolled breach. In that breach that can't be fixed, like a dam when it has a small leak. If you can plug it, fix it, wonderful. But once that dam breaks in this catastrophic failure, and that water is let go behind that dam, there's no stopping it. There's no control on that water. It's going to go where it wants to go, and it's going to cause a lot of damage. And then the Lord is using that as an illustration for us, when it comes to strife. When we allow it to continue, it's going to lead to contention, and before it be meddled with. That word there, meddled with, means to be obstinate. When you have someone who will not change their opinion, one who will not let down, one who will not back down, is one who is obstinate, and it's a fight basically. And it's never going to lead to something good. It's like a quarrel, often begins over a small matter. If it doesn't resolve itself immediately, it can grow into a war. And the best thing to do is to stop it yourself and say nothing back. If both sides insist on being right, things will get out of hand quickly. It's a small spark that causes a huge fire if the spark is not quickly extinguished. And Proverbs 26:20 says, "Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth." If you don't put more logs on the fire, it's going to eventually burn itself out. And by us removing ourselves from a contentious argument like that, we're taking wood off that fire, and we're not allowing it to kindle and burn and cause more harm. Sometimes it's pride that keeps us in that fight. Sometimes it's pride that won't allow us to back down and be seen as the weak part of it. And you know what? Who cares? Wouldn't it be better? How many times have we said words that we wish we didn't say, that we wish we could have taken them back because it caused so much damage? And when it comes to relationships, and then there's grudges that just continue to go on and on and on over words that you wish you could have taken back. And we need to be reminded of that, when we're in these arguments, when we're arguing about such trivial matters. Sometimes it's important matters, I understand, but it's so much better to just take a step back and walk away from it, remove yourself from it, and don't add more logs to that fire. Stop up that leak before it becomes a catastrophic failure and causes all kinds of collateral damage. If you remove the fuel from a fire, it goes out. And we need to always be the more mature part of the problem and take that godly path by removing ourselves from the situation. And there's a couple of examples I want to share with you from the Bible in Genesis 13, where Abraham, remember, before he was called Abraham, he was Abram. And remember, he had gone down into Egypt, and him and his nephew Lot. And when he was down there, he had great possessions. He left Egypt with even more possessions. And in between Lot and Abram, there were just too many people too many animals. They couldn't all stay together, and it was causing some contention. And Abraham saw that contention, and he did something about it. If in Genesis chapter 13 and verse 6 says, "And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left." So Abraham saw a situation that was growing contentious. There was strife that was going to lead to contention, and he found a way to ease the tension. He was a bigger man, higher man than the totem pole here. He could have just said, "Lot, figure it out," but no, he saw that they needed to have a situation where they can ease the tension, and he allowed Lot to choose what land that he wanted to take his people and his herds to, and he gave Lot that choice. And Abram was the bigger man. He was the more godly man in the situation, and he was able to ease that tension, and to where it wouldn't lead to a greater contention, where it could have been civil war between his people and Lot's people, and of course that would have been bad for all of them. And again, Abraham was the bigger man in the situation. And sometimes there is a contention that just means we must be separated. We just don't get along for whatever reason, and there's times when one man or one person needs to go to one direction, and the other person needs to go the opposite direction, because it's going to be for the good of both of them, and good for others too, for them to be separated. And that happened with Paul. Remember in Acts 15, verse 36. And this is during Paul's second missionary journey. Remember in his first missionary journey, John Mark, Barnabas's nephew, had abandoned them basically during the journey, and he went home. And that really upset Paul, that he would have done that. In the second missionary journey, Barnabas wanted to take his nephew Mark with him and give him another opportunity. But Paul said, "No, he abandoned me once, basically. I'm not taking him with me." And there was, and the contention between the two was really sharp, the Bible says. In Acts 15:39, and the contention was so sharp between them that they departed asunder one from the other. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed into Cyprus. And Paul chose Silas and departed, being recommended by the brethren unto the grace of God. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, confirming the churches. And so here we have two men that were not going to work together anymore. They were both good men. They were both right, but they had the contention was just too great, though. You can't have two heads. When it comes to church, when it comes to anything, you need one leader. And if you have two leaders that are at odds with one another, it's only going to cause great harm. And so here they had to separate. At least with Abraham and Lot, there wasn't that contention when they separated. They separated when they were at peace with one another. Here, there's also the separation when there is no peace. And even though I believe it was God's will for Paul to take Silas with him, and for Barnabas to take John Mark with him and to go separate ways, the gospel spread even more. And I believe that was God's will. But still, the contention was so great that they just couldn't work together. And not all men can work together. And when it comes to church, the pastor is the man in charge, and sometimes there's people in church that become very, very contentious and sow discord, and the pastor has to be the one that's able to make that call and say, "No, we're going this direction, or we're going that direction." And there needs to be some submission around that. And if not, it's just going to become contentious. to a point of that wrath the strife is going to turn to contention. There's going to be great wrath and envy. The pride is going to be so destructive. And so it's really it's important for a pastor to be able to see those types of situations and deal with them appropriately and have soft words. A soft answer will turn away wrath, and have the right words. It's so important for a pastor to have wisdom in that regard. But all of us, every single one of us, needs to understand that we can cause great harm for the Lord. Pride leads to envy, and envy leads to wrath, and wrath leads to contention. And in 1 Timothy 6:4 says, "He is proud, knowing nothing, but doting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings." Surmisings are suspicious thoughts about others' motives. You don't trust anyone. It's just a terrible place to be. And when you're surrounded by a lot of people who don't like each other, who don't trust each other, who are jealous of one another, and they're all prideful, and it's not a good situation. It's damaging to the Lord's work and for His will and for His kingdom plan, and shame on us when we allow our arrogance to cause that kind of damage. We need to humble ourselves and submit ourselves to the Lord and submit ourselves to one another. We need to esteem one another. We need to look at others even above ourselves at times and put others first and quit being such selfish Christians and always wanting our problems to be met. And it's always about us, and never about, how God can use us to help others, like my devotion yesterday in Nehemiah. And so we really need to have a better perspective, a more godly perspective, because if not, if we don't have the idea, the concept of following Jesus and putting Him first and putting His kingdom plan first, it's always about putting ourselves first, we're going to have a problem when it comes to strife and contention. We're going to have a problem, and we're never going to want to take that log off the fire. We're going to want to add more and more logs to that fire, just let it heat up and blow up and cause all kinds of collateral damage when it comes to our families, when it comes to our churches, when it comes to the cause of Christ. And so we really need to take this proverb to heart and learn from it and think about all the problems we've had in the past and the things that we caused and how it was just one word, just not stepping away, not allowing ourselves to cool off, and instead of we had to be right in it and making it worse. And so let's really take this to heart. All right, I will talk to you tomorrow.